There comes a moment when love is no longer enough to hold two people together. Not because it failed, but because the peace that once existed between them has been replaced with confusion, tension, or silence. And when that moment comes, a man often stands at a crossroads. He can choose to fight, to argue, to burn bridges, or he can choose something far more difficult. He can choose peace. When a man walks away peacefully, without wrath, without revenge, and without the need to prove a point, he plants a seed in the soil of a woman's heart. A seed that doesn't immediately sprout, but one that changes the landscape of her soul. When you walk away peacefully, you don't just disappear. You leave behind a presence. Your absence speaks, and it speaks louder than any outburst or angry farewell ever could. In that quiet exit, in the way you carried your dignity and your silence, she begins to feel the weight of what you once offered. She remembers how you listened, how you stayed, how you tried. But now, the trying has ended. The door didn't slam, it simply closed, gently. And that gentleness is what begins to echo in her heart. You see, a peaceful exit is a powerful testimony. It testifies of your growth, your maturity, your self-respect. It declares that your love wasn't built on ego or possession, but on value. And when someone walks away with peace, they give the other person the mirror. Not to judge themselves, but to see themselves honestly. When she looks into that mirror, she doesn't see a villain or a victim. She sees her part, her silence, her decisions, her hesitation. And the realization begins to stir. This wasn't just your loss, it was hers too. And this realization is not always immediate. Sometimes weeks pass, sometimes months. But one day, maybe in the quiet of a late night, maybe in the pause between her thoughts, she remembers you. Not as the man who fought to stay, but as the man who chose peace when he could have chosen pride. And in that memory, her heart softens. Not always to bring you back, but to understand that you were different. That you didn't leave in hate. You left in love. You honored what once was, even as you let it go. Peaceful walking away is not abandonment. It's a form of leadership. It's a decision to let your absence teach what your presence no longer could. You didn't destroy her. You didn't shame her. You simply said with your actions, I cannot remain where love is not honored. And friend, that kind of clarity leaves a mark. Not a wound, but a memory. A sacred one. A quiet kind of legacy that lingers in the soul. There is power in letting go with grace. There is healing in silence. There is redemption in peace. And while the world teaches us to leave with noise, the spirit within us calls us to leave with love. Because when you walk away peacefully, you give her one last gift, not confusion, not chaos, but clarity. And in time, that clarity becomes her conviction. So I tell you today, if you must walk away, do it with a full heart, not a bitter one. Do it with peace, not pride. And trust that what's done in love will never return void. For in the quiet moments of her heart, long after you're gone, your peace will preach louder than your presence ever could. When a man walks away peacefully, without slamming the door, without shouting or blaming, he does something deeply unnatural to the chaos of human emotions. He invites silence into a moment that is usually filled with noise. But don't mistake that silence for emptiness. Inside her heart, in the very depths of her soul, a storm begins to form. It is not the storm of anger, not the wild rage of a woman scorned, but the quiet, unsettling turbulence of reflection. You see, when a man exits with gentleness, with calmness in his voice and dignity in his step, he leaves behind a mystery that her heart has no immediate answer for. It is easy to defend oneself against drama. It is easy to justify mistakes when someone leaves shouting. But when you walk away with peace, you take away her defenses. You don't give her a target to point at, or a wound to bandage. Instead, you leave a void that slowly fills with questions she cannot silence. She wonders what made you so calm. She wonders how you had the strength to walk away without trying to win. She wonders whether your silence is made of indifference or of love that simply ran out of roads. And these questions are not loud. They are hauntingly quiet. They echo in the chambers of her heart where pride cannot reach, because pride has no answer for peace. The storm that builds inside her is not about the fight, it's about the absence of one. It's about the way you honored her, even as you left. It's about the way you didn't destroy what was broken, but chose to walk around it and leave it as it was. That kind of walking away doesn't bring closure. It brings depth. And in that depth, she feels the weight of everything that was once shared, everything that was once sacred. She begins to see the moments she didn't notice, the kindness she overlooked, the consistency she assumed would always be there. The storm is not fueled by your words, but by your silence. It is not stirred by accusations, but by the fact that you made none. And it is in that emotional stillness that her heart begins to break, not just for you, but for herself, for the version of her that let something good go unnoticed. It is the storm of memory, of realization, of vulnerability. And that kind of storm doesn't pass quickly. It lingers. It humbles. It teaches. When you walk away with peace, you leave behind not just the memory of what you were, but the impression of who you became. And even though she may not say it, even though she may not show it, deep inside, she is changed by your exit. She may smile, she may post, she may move on, but the storm within her tells a different story. A story of a man who didn't fight to destroy her, but who fought to preserve his own soul while still honoring hers. There is a peculiar strength in a man who chooses not to raise his voice, not to argue for attention, not to stay where love is absent. When he walks away peacefully, there's a weight to that moment, a sacred heaviness that doesn't come from anger, but from clarity. Peace has a gravity all its own. It pulls at the soul in a different way. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't slam doors. It leaves them gently ajar. And when that kind of peace enters the heart of a woman, it doesn't meet resistance. It meets confusion, reflection, and eventually realization. The weight of peace is not about what you say. It's about what you don't say. It's not about the final goodbye, but the way you carry yourself while giving it. And in that stillness, she feels it. She feels that you didn't leave to hurt her. You left to honor yourself. You left to protect what was left of your soul. And she feels that, even if she never admits it. You see, chaos has a predictable rhythm. It's loud, it's explosive, it's easier to ignore. But peace is unnerving when it's unexpected. It settles in the room like smoke, from an unseen fire, slow, quiet, and deeply penetrating. When you walk away without a storm, she begins to carry the weather herself. The calm you leave behind becomes the backdrop for her own emotional reckoning. She may try to brush it off. She may say she's fine. But peace has a way of lingering long after words fade. It hovers in the places you used to stand. It sits quietly at the table where you once smiled. It breathes life into memories that pride tried to bury. Because when you left, you didn't just walk away. You took with you the conflict, the desperation, the noise. And what's left in the absence of all that chaos is the truth. That maybe she was loved more than she realized. That maybe your presence meant more than she allowed herself to feel. That maybe your departure wasn't about punishing her, but freeing yourself. The weight of peace is not a burden to the one who carries it. It's a burden to the one who denied it. And that burden teaches. It teaches her about stillness, about value, about maturity. It reveals things she wouldn't have seen had you chosen to leave in anger. That's why peace is so powerful. It's disarming. It doesn't demand understanding. It invites it. And in time, whether in quiet moments alone or in conversations with her own heart, she begins to recognize it. She begins to feel the pressure of what she didn't fight for, of what she let go unanswered. And in that pressure, she grows, not out of guilt, but out of awareness. Because the weight of peace is not something easily forgotten. It's the kind of weight that settles deep in the soul and reminds her that your love, your restraint, your silence was never weak. It was the evidence of strength she couldn't see when you were still trying to stay. There is something rare, almost divine, about a man who leaves without pointing fingers, without recounting every wrong done to him, without needing to defend his side of the story. When you walk away peacefully, you become something she cannot ignore. A mirror. Not a mirror of accusation, but of quiet reflection. You stop being the subject and start becoming the reflection of her own choices, her silence, her treatment, her neglect, and her timing. And that reflection is not distorted by anger. It's made clear by calmness. She sees in you what she did not see. While you are present, your restraint, your efforts, your consistency, your pain that spoke in quiet ways. And now that you are no longer in front of her demanding attention or validation, she sees herself more honestly. That mirror becomes the most powerful part of your absence. Not because it shows her how much you loved her, but because it shows her what she didn't do with that love. That is what regret is made of, not just losing someone, but realizing that they left with grace you didn't deserve. When you walk away peacefully, you allow her to look at herself without needing to defend her actions. You don't condemn her, you don't criticize her, you simply disappear with dignity. And that dignity becomes the lens through which she sees her own behavior. It reveals to her the moments when she was distant, when she was cold, when she pushed away your presence, thinking it would always be there. Now she's left alone, staring not at the version of you she painted in her frustration, but at the man who never needed revenge to prove his worth. The mirror does not speak. It does not argue. It does not remind her of her mistakes. It simply shows her who she became when someone was loving her gently. And that image is not easy to look at. She may try to run from it, justify it, distract herself, but in the quiet hours, in the sacred spaces where the noise of the world fades, that mirror returns. It waits patiently. It calls softly. And in that moment, she begins to mourn not just for what was lost, but for what she failed to recognize when it was in her hands. Regret has many faces, but the deepest one is born not from the pain you caused, but from the love you offered without receiving its echo. And when a man leaves, with peace, that echo grows louder. It becomes the sound of opportunity missed, of grace mishandled, of presence misunderstood. She remembers the words you didn't say more than the ones you did. She remembers how you stayed calm when you had every right to rage. And in that remembering, the mirror becomes a teacher, not to shame her, but to awaken her. Because you didn't walk away to punish her. You walked away because you finally chose to stop breaking your own heart to prove you loved hers. No one ever expects peace to leave such a lasting impression. In a world that confuses volume with value and chaos with passion, we often believe that silence means indifference. But when a man walks away peacefully, when he closes the chapter not with rage but with reverence, something profound begins to awaken in the heart of the woman left behind. It doesn't awaken immediately. At first, there is numbness, the kind of strange quiet that settles after a gentle goodbye. But then, like a slow sunrise after a long night, realization begins to unfold. She starts to see not just that you left, but how you left, and the difference is everything. You didn't storm out. You didn't tear down what was already fragile. You walked with stillness, with an air of quiet understanding. And that kind of departure doesn't break things, it reveals them. She realizes, slowly and deeply, that you were not just a man who loved her. You were a man who stayed present, even when she withdrew. A man who stayed kind even when her heart grew cold. A man who gave her the best of you, while she gave you only what was left of her. And now that you are gone, not with violence, but with peace, she begins to see it all. The things she didn't say, the chances she let pass, the love she didn't respond to. And in that dawning awareness, something stirs in her spirit. It's not guilt, it's not shame. It's the weight of something sacred now recognized too late. She begins to wonder about the little things you did, the way you listened when no one else did, the way your silence was never empty, but full of understanding. She thinks back to how you walked away, not just from her, but from everything that tried to steal your peace. And suddenly, that peace isn't weakness in her eyes anymore. It's strength, it's power, it's love refined through pain. And what awakens in her heart is the realization that you weren't walking away from her. You were walking back to yourself. That kind of realization doesn't fade with time. It deepens. It matures. It humbles. She may move on. She may meet others. But that awakening stays with her because it taught her something no fight, no closure, no last argument ever could. It taught her that real love doesn't leave people broken. It leaves them better, even if it hurts. And that's what you gave her in your peace. You gave her the clarity to finally see what she had and what she lost, not because you forced her to see it, but because you walked away without needing to be seen. And now, in the silence you left behind, she doesn't hear the echo of your footsteps. She hears the echo of your strength, your patience, your loyalty, your quiet love that asked for nothing, but gave everything until it could give no more. The way a man leaves writes a final, unforgettable testimony in the heart of the woman he once loved. It doesn't matter how long the relationship lasted or how deep the love once ran. What matters most is how you choose to walk away. You may think your calm exit was the end, a quiet closing chapter to something that could no longer survive. But what you don't see is the way that exit becomes a message, living sermon that continues to speak long after your presence fades. When you walk away peacefully, without accusation, without bitterness, without trying to prove how deeply you were hurt, you leave behind a silence that says more than any final speech ever could. That kind of exit shows restraint, character, and clarity. It tells her, without telling her, that your love was not a weapon. It was a gift. And though it was mishandled, you refused to turn it into something ugly. You refused to turn her mistakes into your excuses. You refused to let pain poison your dignity. And that refusal speaks. It speaks when she tries to justify why things ended. It speaks when others ask her what happened. It speaks when the memory of you creeps into the quiet moments she can't prepare for. Your absence, because it was filled with peace, becomes a form of presence. It lingers, not to haunt her, but to remind her. Remind her that someone once stood by her side with patience, fought for her heart with grace, and walked away, not because he stopped caring, but because he refused to lose himself. The way you leave determines how she remembers you. If you leave in anger, she might defend herself. If you leave in cruelty, she might feel relief. But when you leave in peace, she has nothing to hold on to but truth. And that truth is heavy, because it's not stained with drama. It's clean, it's clear. And in that clarity, she sees you for who you truly were. Not perfect, but real. Not loud, but loyal. Not weak, but weary. And your testimony is not just in how you loved her. It's in how you left when the love could no longer breathe. That's what leaves a mark. That's what speaks to her soul. Because you didn't exit with blame. You exited with balance. You didn't tear her down to build yourself up. You simply walked away to preserve what little of yourself was left. And in doing so, you elevated everything about the relationship. You preserved its meaning, even if it didn't last. That's why the peaceful walk away is powerful. It turns your departure into a defining moment, not of destruction, but of revelation. It shows her that love doesn't always need to win to be real. It just needs to be remembered as something sacred. And your peace, your exit, your restraint, it becomes the final testimony that echoes in her memory, not as a regret you forced, but as a truth she cannot escape. When a man walks away peacefully, he doesn't just exit a relationship. He leaves behind an echo, not a loud, haunting echo of resentment, but a soft, sacred one that lingers in the spaces they once shared. That echo is not made of words or gestures. It's made of presence, of character, of everything he didn't say when he could have, of everything he honored even while letting go. His peaceful departure creates a kind of spiritual stillness, a holy hush that wraps itself around the memories, the laughter, the struggles, and the small, intimate moments they once held together. And in that stillness, she begins to feel something different. Not guilt, not shame, but reverence. Because when a man walks away without trying to rewrite the past, without weaponizing the pain, he does something powerful. He preserves the sacred. He doesn't destroy the beauty that once existed, even if it was temporary. Instead, he steps back with grace, allowing space for the truth to speak louder than pride ever could. That kind of walking away doesn't scream closure. It leaves an eye, open-ended reverence, a holy pause, a deep breath in the soul. And long after he's gone, that echo remains. It stays in the way she remembers the sound of his voice, not raised in anger, but quiet with understanding. It stays in the way he chose not to fight for control, but surrendered to what was real. That echo follows her into other relationships, into other conversations, into nights when she lies awake, wondering how something so steady could disappear so quietly. It isn't because he was forgettable. It's because he was unforgettable. In the way he left. She remembers the kindness, the calm, the restraint. She remembers how he didn't beg to be loved, but respected himself enough to leave when he was no longer seen. And in that memory, the sacred lives on. Not as a flame that burns with longing, but as a soft light that warms the soul with truth. The echo of a peaceful exit is not about making her miss him. It's about making her remember what real love feels like when it doesn't demand, but gives. When it doesn't manipulate, but liberates. That echo becomes a teacher, not only for her, but for him. Because the man who walks away in peace doesn't just protect her heart, he protects his own. And in doing so, he creates space for healing, for reflection, for growth on both sides. His exit isn't an act of escape. It's an act of reverence for what was, for who she was, and for who he must now become. And that reverence cannot be mocked or replaced. It becomes a part of her story, a whisper in her spirit, a reminder that not all love ends in fire. Some ends are holy, some departures are sacred. And in the quiet that follows a man who chose peace over pride, love is not erased. It is transformed into something eternal. And so, we come to the quiet truth that many never learn until it's too late. How you walk away can leave a deeper mark than how you stayed. A peaceful departure is not a sign of weakness. It is the final act of strength. It is not about giving up, but about letting go with honor. When you choose not to tear down what once felt sacred, when you choose to step back without blame, without bitterness, you create space not only for her heart to awaken, but for your own soul to heal. A woman may not understand your peace in the moment. She may misread your silence, underestimate your quiet strength, or assume you didn't care. But in time, that peace will echo. It will reach places that your words never could. It will challenge her memory, soften her pride, and awaken the part of her that once felt safe in your presence. And whether she ever says it or not, whether her life takes a different path or circles back to yours, one thing remains true. Your exit became your message. You did not leave to be remembered. You left because you remembered who you are. You honored what once was, even when it no longer could be. You chose peace, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in doing so, you left behind something far greater than regret. You left behind a legacy of love that didn't need to shout. To be heard. That, my friend, is what happens in her heart when you walk away peacefully.